What's going on, guys? This is Rob. If you guys enjoy my content, make sure you hit the subscribe button and make sure you hit that little bell so you never miss out on my sexy voice. Okay, so we are getting into the origin of Ghost Rider 1 million. Now, really, I call it Ghost Rider 1 million. It's technically 1 million BC. Anyway, this is the origin story of that character. Now, here is an important thing to bear in mind, and we talked about this in the first Avengers story arc that Jason Aaron did. The original, not really the original, but Avengers Volume 1, as part of Marvel's Fresh Start, was a total upheaval for the origin of all superheroes on the face of the planet Earth. It was insane. It was massive. This was a big change. It changed why the Celestials came, it changed what the Celestials did, and it changed how the genes of humans were meddled with. But what Jason Aaron's been doing this entire time is introducing the idea of an Avengers team that existed 1 million years before the modern day. But it is kind of a cool thing, because what this does is it explains how this Ghost Rider 1 million came into existence and how it is that this character became part of the Avengers team. Now, what this does is this jumps back to the days of early man. This is actually a really, really cool thing. Basically, it's at that kind of missing link, but when, between the time that man was modern, more or less, and the time you had ape. So it was kind of like that ape man missing link. Now, this is cool because it's Jason Aaron kind of tying things into the roots, because the idea of humans' genes being modified in the early days by Celestials, that was ape man. And while he's wiped that away, what it has done is it still takes place in that point in time, that missing link era. And so what we end up doing is picking up with this one guy who doesn't really have a name. And instead, he's just like a pretty young member of his own group and is exceedingly intelligent, and that causes fear among his people. Now, the whole idea is that Jason Aaron plays with this and says this is basically a tribe that lives in the cave and has never left the cave. They were born into the cave, they stay in the cave, and they never leave. That this very primitive tribe has never left its own environment. And as a result, all the space outside, they refer to as the Great White, which of course is basically saying this is in a wintry area, in a much colder area. It's always cold out there, and no one ever goes out there for fear that they may die. But for this troop itself, because of the fact that basically everything out there is unknown to them, they're terrified of anything different from themselves. And so what they end up doing is basically casting out those who are perhaps misformed, who are deformed when they're born, those who aren't strong enough, or even in the case of this child, those who were too smart. Anything that's deemed to be scary is cast out and pushed away. And so in this instance, what ends up happening is somebody just kind of shows up here one day and then kills some of the members of the tribe. And this leads to him basically being put in the position of an alpha male. Again, hitting back to early tribe culture. Now, this guy basically seizes control and takes over. And so what you end up getting here is this guy kind of leading the whole thing, but he's exceedingly smart, he's well spoken. And that's the big difference between himself, this kid, and everybody else. This kid is the first one to learn how to speak. He's the first one to learn language. Now, we're not told explicitly how. There's really no definitive answer here, but this older guy is much the same way. I mean, he's very well spoken, he's very eloquent, and what he talks about here is the idea that these members of this kid's tribe who are primitive, who are scared of things that are different, they're essentially cattle, they're prey. They serve the purpose of being consumed by those who are stronger, because they're too unintelligent. They don't have what it takes to make it on their own. And this guy kind of shows this by morphing into a beast of sorts and killing everyone. Now, as soon as I saw this guy transform, and as soon as I saw the shadow, I was like, that's a Wendigo. As soon as that, and the fact that he was dressed in all white, then I was like, this has to be a Wendigo, or a Wendigo, I think is how some people pronounce it, but I pronounce it a Wendigo. He had to be a Wendigo. Now, for those of you guys who don't know what that means, Wendigos made their debut in Marvel Comics in 1978 with the Incredible Hulk 162. But it was a guy named Paul Cartier. And the idea here was that the Incredible Hulk had stumbled into the Canadian wilderness, and basically some people were attacked by a beast in the woods. And you ended up finding out it was this guy named Paul who was turning into a Wendigo. Now, at the time, Steve Englehart did not really offer any measure of an explanation. That didn't come until 2014, I think it was, with Amazing X-Men number 12. I want to say it was the second volume, but with Amazing X-Men 12 by Craig Kyle and Chris Yost. And that dealt with a guy named Tarnak, and we'll talk about him here in a second. But in the original Steve Englehart stories, all you really had was just this curse that had been laid upon anybody in the Canadian wilderness by the elder gods, and that was it. It was this idea that if a person consumed the flesh of another human being, they would be transformed into a Wendigo, and they would be cursed to maintain that for all eternity, unless the curse was lifted by basically sacrificing them or something along those lines. I can't remember off the top of my head. But they were just sort of characters that were thrown in for the purpose to say, here is a thing a hero is dealing with at the time when the story starts, and that's it. By the time 2014 scene came around with Craig Kyle and Chris Yoss suggesting that, what they did is they tied in the character of Sasquatch. And what they said was that the original, God, I can never remember his name. The original Sasquatch, when he became his character, he was actually switching places with a guy named Tarnak. And Tarnak was the one who had initiated this curse. Again, no one's really done a whole lot to really create like a one-shot on the origin of the Wendigos because they don't really matter. I mean, they're not really relevant. I know there's some people out there who love them, and I'm sorry to say that, but like, they don't really matter at all. But still, this guy basically lays waste to everything and simply tells this kid, if you want to know my name, come and find me, and we'll go from there. Now, this is when Mephisto steps in, and this is how it always works. For those of you guys who don't know, who are new to Marvel Comics, who are stumbling into this video, Mephisto is both the devil and not the devil in Marvel Comics. And I say not the devil because Satan actually does exist in Marvel Comics. Now, the way this character works, he's wildly powerful. Mephisto is insanely powerful, but he's the most powerful in his own realm. So the longer he's gone from the realm of hell, the weaker he gets. But what he'll usually do is, if there needs to be like a Ghost Rider, or if the story calls for it or something like that, he'll basically reach out from beyond the grave, essentially, or kind of, from his own dimension, and he'll trick a person into becoming the Ghost Rider. And he'll say, look, if you are willing to sell your soul to me, then like I will give you everything you want. And it's never usually that blunt, right? He won't say like, sell your soul to me. He'll do exactly what you're doing here. Well, I can give you the tools for revenge. I can help you achieve this. And in the instance where this kid's freezing, he's like, don't you want to be warm? Like, don't you want to warm up? I can make it so that you never freeze again. It's little things like this. It's coming in and sort of offering himself as a guy that can give them every wish, every desire that they want to fulfill. And then of course, we end up finding out it's the pact of the Ghost Rider. And so when he becomes a Ghost Rider, basically you have to be released. Ghost Riders just sort of serve this purpose. They're doomed to that role for all eternity. But what ends up happening is that with this kid being basically met with the powers of Mephisto, the powers of the Ghost Rider, this allows him to go forward. Now, for 5 years, this kid searches all up and down the Canadian wilderness looking for this guy and ultimately manages to find him. But because of the fact that this man had basically named this kid Ghost, simply said like, your name from now on is Ghost, and then in turn he became the Rider, 2 and 2 are thrown together. His first name's Ghost, his last name is Rider. Now, we're not given any indication that's why Ghost Riders are called Ghost Riders. That's just why he has this name. They're called Ghost Riders because the name sounds badass. That's why they're called Ghost Riders, because it sounds awesome. But still, like, with Ghost Rider facing off against Wendigo, it's not a small thing. Now, here's the other important thing to remember. This kid's just now learned what he's capable of. I mean, you'd have to assume within the last 5 years, his main focus has been hunting for this guy. And so he hasn't really looked into doing things like the penance stare. He hasn't really looked into like expanding his abilities and learning what he's fully capable of, right? It's like getting your paycheck and then running off to the bank to deposit it. You don't really do anything with it in between, or at least getting cash and then running off to the bank to deposit it. You don't really do anything with it in between, so you don't really know what all it can buy. And so with this situation, it's the exact same thing. At least that seems to be the case. And it seems to be kind of what Jason Aaron's running with here. Now, the other thing to bear in mind here is that Wendigos are not just like a Sasquatch type beast that's just like kind of strong. Wendigos are strong as hell. Like they're extremely strong. Like they can go pound for pound with the Incredible Hulk. Super strength, super speed, a healing factor. These things, Wendigos are not by any means like pushovers. They're not fighting what amounts to like feral wolves. And so when you have this Ghost Rider kid facing off against this Wendigo, you basically have a kid with a new set of powers. He doesn't fully understand that you can kind of use energy blast here and there, facing off against a guy who's presumably been a Wendigo for who only knows how long. I mean, really, it's an ageless curse. You're talking about a guy who could be a Wendigo. This guy could have been a Wendigo for like 1,000 years. You don't really know how long he's been this way. But like holding his own against this kid, like just totally wrecking him, is pretty damn impressive. I mean, like this Wendigo gets impaled by the woolly mammoth this kid's been riding on. Can we all just take a moment to say, like, to acknowledge this kid has been riding on a woolly mammoth that blows fire out of its trunk? How badass is that? Like that's like one of the coolest things ever. I want to see that like right now. Like I want to see that in comics right now. This mammoth impales this Wendigo, and then the Wendigo like grabs the mammoth, throws it over, and then falls over alongside it. And that's kind of the crazy thing, because he makes the comment, I'll survive this whole thing. Will you? And this kid doesn't know that he would. That's kind of the crazy thing. Like if he jumped over, he would survive it. I mean, he would survive the experience. His body would be broken all to pieces, but like he would survive it. But what this does is it means that like this kid says, he kind of hears a disembodied voice that tells him, you're not all alone. Like you're not by yourself. There are people out there who are just like you. And when this kid turns around, he's met by the arrival of the Phoenix and Odin. And basically, this is the reason why he was brought in, because they need him to fight the Celestials. But it's kind of cool here, because what this seems to indicate is that like he would go on to understand the full brunt of his powers, what he was truly capable of. Now, presumably a lot of this would be learned from the Phoenix, or could be learned from Odin. We're not sure, because the Ghost Rider stands alone. And so it really is kind of cool to get this origin story and to see how this guy came came to be, and it's pretty interesting. I'm actually really excited. I want to read some stories about like the Avengers 1 million BC, so long as it's written by like Jason Aaron or Craig Kyle, Chris Yost, like any of like the top writers at Marvel at the moment. I would go with Becky Cloonan. I would read the hell out of an Avengers 1 million by Becky Cloonan. Let me tell you something, man. Becky Cloonan, she was the one who wrote Punisher before what's his name took over. Dude, Becky Cloonan's Punisher run was just stupid good. And like, dude, I'm so sad they took her off. They did it like a year ago. We need to have Becky Cloonan write Avengers 1 million. Like we need to have that done. That would be cool. If Jason Aaron doesn't want to do it, then Becky Cloonan should, because like that'd actually be pretty badass. Anyway, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comments Explain, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.